Good morning and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of the Hill Country on Zoom. My name is Don Schloss and I'm a service associate this morning. We are pleased to see all of you here on the screen. I see a couple returning visitors, Julie and Kat, and I am not certain about Beth. Is this your first time? And if so, would you like to introduce yourself? Justin will have to unmute you. No.
Hello, my name's Beth Wan. My pseudonym is Beth from the Boat. I met Chuck and Linda in 1976, and we've been friends ever since. And this is my second Zoom service with UU. I've been in person, and I'm here because my favorite filmmaker is going to have a film.
Auntie Beth, welcome.
Hi, sweetie. It's nice to see you all again.
Good to have you here, and I can understand if you were friends with Chuck and Linda, why you stayed friends with Chuck and Linda. And of course, today we welcome Michael Wurth, whose bio, if it wasn't in the order of service, it was in the newsletter that you got. Michael has a long and complex bio, which includes a long history as a Unitarian Universalist, a Buddhist, a counselor, a filmmaker, and probably a whole lot more that I really don't know about him. Announcements. Do we have any announcements? If you do, wave your hand or nope, no announcements. In that case, we will light our chalice. Our chalice lighter will come up. Fire consumes and casts a bright light. May our chalice flame consume our regrets for the past, our fears about the future, and our worries about today. May it light for us a path of joy and peace. We will now have our first song, which is Blessed Spirit of My Life.
Hard to let them go.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All right.
Okay. Please join with me in looking at the front of your order of service or the words that Justin will put on the screen, and say with us, we can all say together the mission statement and our affirmation.
Oh. Wrong one. Hang on.
Okay. We journey together guided by UU values to seek, nurture, and serve our loving church family, our community, and our world. The affirmation. The doctrine of this church is love. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. And this is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship as we strive to have all souls grow into harmony with the divine. And we'll have a reading, which is from Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass, Song of Myself. What is the grass? A child said, "What is the grass?" fetching it to me with full hands. How could I answer the child? I do not know what it may be more than he. I guess it must be the flag of my disposition, out of hopeful green stuff woven. Or I guess it is the handkerchief of the Lord, a scented gift and remembrancer designedly dropped, bearing the owner's name, some way in the corner, that we may see and remark and say, whose? Or I guess the grass is itself a child, a product of the babe of vegetation. Or I guess it is a uniform hieroglyphic, and it means sprouting alike in broad zones and narrow zones, growing among Black folk as well as among white, Canuck, Tuckahoe, Congressman, Cup. I give them the same, and I receive them the same. And now it seems to me the beautiful uncut hair of graves. Tenderly I will use you, curling grass. It may be that you transpire from the breasts of young men. It may be that you are from the old people or from offspring taken. It may be if I had known them, I would have loved them soon out of their mother's laps, and here you are, the mother's laps. The grass is very dark to be from the white beards of old mothers, darker than the colorless beards of old men, dark to come from under faint red roofs of mouths. Oh, I perceive that after so many uttering tongues, and I perceive they do not come from the roofs of the mouths for nothing. I wish I could translate the hints about the dead young men and women, and the hints about old men and mothers, and the offspring taken too soon out of their laps. And what do you think has become of the young and old men? And what do you think has become of the women and children? They are alive and well somewhere. The smallest sprout shows there really is no death. And if there was, it led forward life, and it does not wait at the end to arrest it, and ceased the moment life appeared. It goes onward and outward, nothing collapses. And to die is different from what anyone supposed, and luckier. Now is the time for our offertory. In spite of the fact that we are meeting on Zoom, many of our expenses continue. And this house is a house of freedom, built and sustained by the gifts of those who come to receive what they need and give what they can. This house is your house. May it always be worthy of the gifts it receives from you. We hope that you will continue to support this house by dropping a check or money by the church or mailing it in to the church address. Thank you. Today we are fortunate to have with us Michael Wurth, who is sharing with us a film that he wrote and directed. And we'll get Michael to explain to us.
Yes, good morning. This film is a film that I directed and produced and wrote with my filmmaking partner, Sean Hyatt in Hawaii, called Sunday Wind. And it takes place on Pearl Harbor Day. And the film came about because Sean had been working on another project and had been interviewing some old survivors of Pearl Harbor Day. Or very young, they were very young children at the time, but this was in the early 2000s. But there were a few elderly folks who still remember the attack. And on the north side of Oahu, he encountered some folks who actually told the story that we verified, that the Japanese actually warmed up their weapons on civilians on the north side of Oahu before actually commencing the attack on the harbor itself. And we contemplated that event through the eyes of a family that we are making several short films about in various points of Hawaii's key history in the last 125 years or so. So we were able to write that. We actually were able to shoot the film right there in the middle of the the same portions of Oahu where the attacks actually occurred, and where at the time, at least, it was a lot of the taro patches and the other agricultural stuff was still fairly unmolested and still doing what it was doing that morning. And one of the things that called us to this story also is the number of times that Hawaii, since its discovery by the West, had been valued very much for its remoteness and certainly its people, but had also been used quite willingly, or not willingly, quite the large powers of Europe and Japan and so forth had used Hawaii as kind of a token, and they had fought over it. They had done a lot of different things where they had inflicted great damage, where Hawaii didn't really have a say in the matter. And Hawaiians certainly had no say in the matter, and Hawaii became quite accustomed to being used as a pawn. And that's just something that I thought was useful to keep in mind, talking about things that we're going through now in terms of, as a psychotherapist, I deal with a lot of clients who feel a profound sense of not just some hopelessness, but they feel like they're powerless, like they're like nothing that they do is going to impact what they perceive as these great extremes fighting each other. And so I just thought it would be, I was honored to be asked to share this, and I think it may stand as a small example in Hawaii's history of what many people are feeling now. And so I suppose I'd ask John, just to get if he's got it queued up. I'm
Yep.
not certain.
We're ready to go.
All right, let's hit it.
Kimo.
Kimo.
What?
Time you get in.
Who says I got in?
Come on. We never did like making this walk. When I was a kid, we was always looking for something for do for make them shorter. I remember one time my brother, he go find this bicycle. It was all bossed up. It was half buried in one irrigation ditch. You know the one, Marker Field 34.
So he spent 2 weeks cleaning them up.
That's right, he spent 2 weeks cleaning them up. You know how? Use sandpaper on steel at first because Yokimura store had plenty sandpaper that month. Went sandpaper the whole house. My cousin's house. Mrs. Silver even went sandpaper her wiener dog. But my brother, he just worked on the bike the whole time. And then finally, he finished the bike, but no more tires. So my brother, he tried to ride them anyway, but the wheel cut into the dirt there. So he go get 2 big strands of rope from Shaky DeLima's house, and he wrap them around the rim of the tire. Oh, worked pretty good, rope tires.
それで走るのか?
Not too bad. At first it worked pretty good, but then he tried to get up to speed. He went cut left, and poof, pulley. He go right over the bars, landed right into some fresh pineapple. Took us 1 hour to get all the spines out his leg. And Shaky the Lima, he went nuts when the water tower fell off his house. Yeah, Kimo, he was the smart one.
Kimo.
That's my brother's kid. He's smart just like him. Lazy like him too. Stink just like him.
Hey, Uncle. My dad did that.
Yeah?
And what? I look like him too.
Brother, I had a lot of brothers. I was the youngest of 5. I was Misokas. We いつも競争してた, trying to beat each other. Our neighbor had this beautiful black horse, a stallion. It could have been the horse of samurai. It was so beautiful. So one day we decided we were samurai. We went to ride the horse on the moonless night. 風のない夜でフクロウが You could hear an owl from a mile away. I was afraid of being discovered. My oldest brother, Shoji, he tried first, but 2、3歩行ったらすぐに振り落とされちゃった。The second brother, Kenji, he didn't last even that long. It was very 賢い smart horse. Finally, it was my turn. I was so scared, Kioni, but I was going to be a samurai. I was going to ride the horse. My brother couldn't. 大将になりたかった。I was going to be a cowboy. So I rode the horse. He kicked, he bucked, but I would not let go. He dragged me up against the wall, but I would not let go. Then suddenly he took off across the field. Running, running, but I would not let go. I was holding on for my life. 死ぬかと思った。Then finally, he slows down. He stops. He returned to the stable. He was mine. I was a samurai. My brothers were cheering, except Shoji. He hurt his leg. They wanted kataguruma, carry me on their shoulders. And I said, no.
Why not?
I couldn't tell them. I was so scared. 漏らしちゃった。I made shishi over myself.
Oh no. You know, one time when we was kiki, my brother and I, we had this big idea for use the old man's Model T while he was away in Honolulu. We wanted to impress the Freitas girls down the valley. They were the plantation manager's daughters, so, you know, gotta look good, eh? But my old man, he was strict, so we knew we had to be careful because he took care of that truck. It was nice, you know, shiny. It was, how you say,
Shiny?
Kira.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Tosina.
Pretty.
Yeah, it was still pretty. You know, but me and my brother, we was all kolohi anyway, so we snuck the truck out. We start driving them down the road. We almost get to the girl's house. And Kimo, he hits this rut in the road. The truck goes right into a fence post. The front bumper was all jammed up. Had one big dent inside. He tell me, oh, now look what happened. You gonna get it. I tell him, me? Bro, you the one was driving. He said, yeah, but you're the number one son. He gonna kill you for letting me drive.
Number one son. あんたが止めなくちゃな
Yeah,
らな
but
か
I
った。
could never stop Kimo from doing anything, ever. But lucky for me, my best friend, his father was one blacksmith. So we took the truck over to his house, try to fix him up. And his father was getting drunk inside the kitchen, so we took the bumper out in the back of the house and we pounded horseshoe stakes in the ground. And that's where we did the pounding, so cannot hear from the shop. And it was getting kind of late, so you know we had to hurry up. By the time we was pow, the horseshoe stakes was only about 2 inches out of the ground. But lucky for us, we made them back just in time before my father came home. We parked the truck, we go inside the house, we all quiet, like nothing happened. My father, he walked right past the Model T. He go inside the house, put his stuff away, talk to my mom a little while, grab one banana. He look at us, he go, hey, you boys go out at all today? Tell him, no, Papa was just hanging around the house, working all day. Why? I said, oh, no reason. Just wondering what a bumper on the Model T was upside down. Oh, I got dirty lickings. I should have just told the truth. And Kimo was right. I got more worse lickings than him because I was the oldest. So you better watch yourself, young brother. Your sister do something wrong. That means you did something wrong. Oh boy, you leasing just like
Uncle
your father.
Keone, what's that? Uncle? Uncle? Uncle Keone! You hurt! Uncle Keone! No. Uncle Keone! No! No! No, Uncle Keone! We need to get help! We need a doctor! No, no, Uncle Keone! It's okay. I'm sorry. 手当てが必要だ。病院行こう。
Jenkins, the Oklahoma and the Arizona? Keep us posted.
They're gonna invade.
Are they going to invade, Sarge? You just keep your eyes open and your mouth shut. We got California covered.
Don't worry. I've been in tougher scrapes than this. My foot itches.
Why? Why does that happen? We go Army hospital. They have hospital. We go home. No, we go hospital. You hurt? Scoliosis can fix. No, you need doctors. Where? This way. Yoshi, Yoko's best friend. Kimo! 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 しっかりしろ、Kimo! 誰か誰かいないか誰か誰かいないか助けてくれ誰かキモキモ死ぬなキモキモキモ死ぬなキモキモ誰か誰か助けてくれ
What's that?
誰か
Who's there?
キモキモ死ぬな
Oh shit. Stay calm, stay calm, stay calm. Eyes open, mouth shut.
Hey, hold your fire! No.
Shot a Hawaiian guy. I got me one.
Used sandpaper at first on steel, cause Yukimoto's store choked sandpaper that month. They went sand our whole house, his cousin's house,
This is silver even when Santa wiener dog.
Thank you. There's a song that we've also selected to go with this by the great brother Israel Kamakawi'ole, that may inspire a different hearing now than it would normally. If you have that up.
Thank you, Justin, and thank you, Michael. We'll now have congregational response, and we'll do this the same way we did Joys and Sorrows. Either wave at your camera or put something in the chat box, and Justin will unmute you and have you speak. Comments? Nobody? Go.
It's hard to follow, brother is.
Okay, let me get Kevin Kevin first, and I've got Mari and Mike.
Well, I don't know the specifics about Hawaiian history, but I do know in general that American fruit companies were deeply involved in deposing the Chinese, Hawaiian royalty. And so I do remember that every time I have some Del Monte bananas or pineapple for breakfast, although those may have come from Central America or Mexico.
Yes, by now, actually, that is the case. Most of them are coming from Central America, but still to this day, the island of Lanai is still technically privately owned. I mean, it's owned by one company. And so the restrictions getting in and out of that island and the two resorts that drive most of its economy now are, very, very restricted.
All right, and then Mari was up next. Just a moment here. Mari, you should see the prompt to unmute now.
I couldn't help, as I was listening to the sadness in the song, to think of American Indians, the native people of this country, who must have a great deal of the same kind of feelings. The landscape is different, obviously, but feelings of displacement, feelings of desecration of someplace they feel is holy, was profound. And thank you, Michael. It reminds us that all the amenities that we have, the beauty that we feel we've created has belonged to other people, and other people right now, particularly with the pandemic, they're suffering greatly. I don't know if that's true in Hawaii too, but it was very moving. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate that. Yes, the Native Hawaiians and a lot of Native American activist groups have been sometimes comfortable bedfellows, sometimes not so much. simply because there's a large portion of the Native Hawaiian community that still regards, this is still being unfinished business, and they will want to use different language sometimes in describing some things. But no, it is a matter of viewing how the way each group, to use very broad strokes and generalizing, is mostly ecology minded. They're mostly, taking care of their own resources, and to be betrayed by their own leaders, especially in the 70 years before the takeover in 1893, where their own leaders would sometimes just ravage the side of a mountain. One of the reasons there's a giant rain shadow over the island of Koho'olawe is because the koa trees were stripped off of the south side of Haleakala when they became, when people discovered the beauty of koa wood. And if you haven't had something made out of koa wood, it's really tremendously beautiful. It's also not harvested any longer. But at the time, the harvest was just wholesale. And and in a place like Hawaii, an ecosystem like Hawaii, you can see the effects of it right away. Because just with the tropical climate, everything grows there. And this would include the coronavirus. And so they did their very best, and they were pretty strict in the first few months. And then invariably, especially Oahu, was struck by the virus very strongly. And of course, it choked their tourist industry tremendously. It's going to take years for them to recover.
All right, Mike, I saw your hand up, and then Chuck, I'll get you next.
All right, Michael, I'm sorry, our sound isn't the best here. We heard at the final scene, sandpaper and steel, but I did not catch the very end of what he said. Would you mind telling me what was said right at the final words?
Oh, certainly. Right at the end, he was basically quoting and rehearsing the story that his uncle had told about when Yukimura Store had choke plenty sandpaper. It means a lot of sandpaper, too much, in fact. And it said first on steel, and then, forgive me, I don't have the line memorized any longer. But the idea would be that the last line is, Miss Silva even went sandpaper her wiener dog.
Okay, I thought that's what I heard, but I wasn't clear about that. Okay.
If the audio is clicking in and out, then I can understand not trusting that line of dialogue.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and Chuck, you're up.
Mike, as producer, would you like to make a comment about Ray?
Absolutely, thank you for that. When it says for Ray at the end, it's referring to the actor who played Uncle Keone, the bald older gentleman, was Ray Bumatai. This was his last film. He died of brain cancer shortly thereafter. And in fact, he had been so stricken by the time we were shooting the film that he could see very little. And we had the table read of the final table read a few days before we start to shoot, and he struggled tremendously and came up to Sean and me afterwards and said, hey, I've got this, don't worry, just give me a chance to do it. And of course it's Ray, who had such an illustrious history as an entertainer in Hawaii. And he was a friend of ours, so absolutely. And he brought it in very, very beautifully, and even was able to impart a lot of humor on the set that day. And Troy Ignacio, the young man in the film, and Chiro Kawai, both just went to school on how a professional does this, despite the challenges he was facing. And sadly, he passed just before the Hawaii International Film Festival, where the film premiered. He'd held on as long as he could, but just a couple of weeks beforehand, he left us. But it gave us a chance to make a wonderful tribute to him at the festival, and we miss him still.
Any other questions or comments? Oh, David, one second. Let me get you on here.
Yeah, Michael, I was just wondering, as a, um, well, I was a professor of literature most of my younger life, and following the narrative line of your film, I'm one. I mean, it seems to me, in a kind of in broad strokes, that I guess what I'm thinking about is the specific relationship of the dialogue in the body of the film before the attack. Um, am I right in saying that it is that the specific content of what they say to each other isn't as important as is the everyday, ordinary chatting, relating as friends and relatives in the ordinariness of it is the point. Am I right about that? And then bam comes the attack.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's a great observation, because that's exactly what we were trying to convey in almost so many words is how I would communicate it when directing. It's that yeah, that we can pay attention to what the stories are, and they have some humor for a reason, to make it easy to do that. But mostly it's just the interplay and the fact that the two older men have their own, communication, sometimes in glances, and we never even considered subtitling anything from Japanese into English, because it we made sure that when he did draw upon the Japanese, that it was either understood what he was saying, or we understood that there was just a detail or two that he was adding. That didn't really matter. What mattered was that they had this kinship, which was actually quite true. There were Japanese taro farmers who were just, I mean, they were the target of some of these initial forays as well. And in fact, the rupture in the way the Japanese and the Hawaiians related to each other had, in some ways still kind of exists in Hawaii. But definitely up until the early 70s, the war made a huge, it damaged tremendously the race relations between Japanese and Hawaiians. And before, it wasn't like that. But thank you. That's a very good observation.
All right, let me get Carolyn, and then I've got Maria again. 1 second here.
Some of you may know the Big Island of Hawaii is one of my favorite places on earth. I spent a great deal of time there, and the footage that was when Iz was singing. By the way, he is such a fabulous singer also, and he's famous for singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow. And just look up, Google IZ, just Iz. But the footage that was shown during the song is from a place called the City of Refuge on the Big Island. And Google it. It is for me, it is one of the most sacred places I've been. It's hauntingly beautiful and very sacred. It's Pu'u Honua O Honanau. And Google it. Just Google City of Refuge, Hawaii, and give yourself a treat. And listen to Iz while you're looking at it.
And Mari, I saw you had your hand back up. Let me get you unmuted here.
Yeah, I'm just haunted by what I think I heard the last words were. Did one of the soldiers say, "I got one"?
Yes, as a matter of fact, that was.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing, but and I had to ask.
Yes, and the ironic thing is that the actor who played that role was the only person on set who, other than Shiro, who's Japanese, whose Japanese was perfect. I mean, he's absolutely committed to Japanese language and culture, and he understood exactly the gravity of that line and how quickly, because the idea is that yes, the Americans were attacked at Pearl Harbor, but it's not as though they had a great deal of knowledge of where they were either. Most of them were very young. Most of them had, it was a beautiful paradise, and they didn't really, there wasn't need for them to know much more than that. And so understanding and having a lot of radio traffic about the Japanese, and then suddenly thinking, wow, I've got one when it's just a civilian, is precisely how twisted things can get.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
All right, and Jill, let me get you up here.
We had been to Hawaii only once, and we were on the island of Kauai. And we observed at that time that if we strayed away from the really familiar tourist spots, if you went to some little out of the way place, and if there were Hawaiian people around, you had a very clear sense of hostility. And even at that time, I understood why, because there is this conflict between the fact that we need tourists, and yet they're just taking advantage of our beautiful place. And I found the same thing in other tourist places too, like the Bahamas and the Virgin Islands and places like that, because they're really caught in a trap of how they make a living and still keep their dignity and their pride in their homeland. It's very sad.
You can wander into some places where some of the looks are definitely questioning as to, sometimes it's actually a very confused curiosity as to, we're not sure why there's Howley people here. But the island of Kauai is exceptional in that they were struck by Hurricane Iniki so thoroughly back in the early 90s, I think. To the point where it simply set their tourism development back decades. So now, Maui has had no such arrest on their tourist development, and Maui is a tremendously, it's a playground for wealthy people in a lot of people's eyes. But Kauai is not there yet, and in fact, Kauai is very proud of not being Maui, and or at least they used to be. And so there's a slightly different relationship with the tourist industry.
There was actually, next to the place where we stayed, there was the ruin of something that had been ruined by, I believe that was the hurricane that had destroyed this building. It had been a hotel.
Mm-hmm. No, Iniki took, that would have been on the south side of the island around Poipu, where there's a lot of.
Poipu. It was Poipu, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
To tack on to what she said, I remember on our trip to Hawaii, we had a helicopter pilot that was flying us over the Arizona Memorial, and we had kind of touched on that subject, and his quote was, "Imperialism is a hell of a drug." And Carolyn, I got you up next.
We were lucky enough we took care of a small coffee farm for 6 weeks in the summer for several years on the Big Island up in Holualoa on the coffee road. And it was rural Hawaii. And it was a whole different world. It was completely different. We had wild turkeys in the trees and feral hogs sniffing around the mangoes. And, it's a different world. And there are a lot of Hawaiian nationalists who are still fighting for Hawaiian, I don't know, independence, but at least fighting for the original Hawaiian rights and so on. There are two different worlds, definitely.
All right, and Linda, let me get you up there. Sorry, the list keeps scrolling too fast.
Yes, Vicky has asked the question, is the cattle ranch on the Big Island still operating? Do you know that, Michael?
What I can say is to the five families who owned or who directed the 5 large cattle ranches on Maui are still technically in existence, but there's been a consolidation, some of it even this year. But the local production, the amount of beef that they produce has diminished significantly. In that, it's the same thing that happened with sugarcane. It's the land became too valuable for development than it was for its agricultural purposes. And up in upcountry Maui, like the Ulapalakua Ranch and a few places like that, the Haleakala Ranch, they're still in production, but an awful lot of people visit there every day.
And also, you made a sequel to this, another short film that describes a different time. Would you tell them about that?
Yes, my publicist, ladies and gentlemen, Linda Smith. Thanks, Mom. Yes, the film that followed this one took place on Statehood Day in 1959, and it was called The First Hawaiian Snowball Fight. And where Kimo, the young man that you saw wounded in this film, has a teenage son of his own. And is estranged from his family for the most part, though, and he's come back from a job he has on the Big Island, and he visits on the very day of statehood, and brings a cooler of snowballs from Mauna Kea, and the family is still having a difficult time keeping the rest of the world from interfering with their happiness.
And how long did you live in Hawaii?
What's that?
How long did you live in Hawaii?
Oh, heck, I'm still there. No, about 10 years off and on. A couple of those on Maui, but mostly on Oahu. And, like Vicky, or like Carolyn, rather, I'm enamored of the Big Island and have some friends that are very dear to me there that I haven't seen in far too long. But I'm afraid of going to the Big Island these days because I'm afraid I won't leave. So I take the family and we'll just stay there and build a house on the lava. Thank you all for the chance to present this and to talk with you all about it. This is for me, it was very nice just to see Ray. I'm glad you guys got to see him as well.
Thank you for presenting and for being with us today. If you're ready, we can now extinguish the chalice, and then may today there be peace within. May you trust that you are exactly where you are meant to be. May you not forget the infinite possibilities that are born of faith in yourself and others. May you use the gifts that you have received and pass on the love that has been given to you. May you be content with yourself just the way you are. Let this knowledge settle into your bones and allow your soul the freedom to sing, dance, praise, and love. It is there for each of us and for every one of us. And as the closing words, I would like to paraphrase the philosopher Edwin Starr, who is most known for saying, war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Thank you, and we're now open for general discussion.